The heart of the American West is interlaced with roads that stretch for miles without any sign of civilization. Among these desolate highways, one stood out, Route 119. As the years passed, larger highways and interstates overshadowed it, leaving Route 119 almost forgotten except for an old gas station that became a local legend. The Luminary gas station, a lone building with a rusted sign, was a beacon on the deserted stretch. Travelers shared tales of pulling in, desperate for gas, only to find that the pumps were always running and the fuel was always free. It became a rite of passage for young adventurers to travel the highway and fill their tanks at Luminary. Sarah and Alex, a couple in their late 20s, were one such pair. Armed with stories of the legendary free gas, they embarked on a road trip. As their fuel gauge neared empty, the silhouette of Luminary gas station appeared on the horizon. Pulling in, they noticed the pumps looked surprisingly modern, contrasting the decaying exterior of the station. They fueled up, their astonishment growing as the meter stayed stuck at 0. The old store adjacent to the pumps was dark, but a flickering neon sign read, "Open." On a whim, Sarah decided to buy a souvenir, a memory of their adventure. Inside, the air was musty. Old newspaper clippings adorned the walls, talking about the gas station's inception, its heyday, and then its decline. One article, however, stood out. It was dated from the 70s and talked about a series of disappearances along Route 119. Each individual had last been seen at Luminary. Shaking off a rising unease, Sarah made her way to the counter, picking up a dusty snow globe depicting the station. An elderly man, seemingly materializing from the shadows, greeted her. His voice was raspy, but friendly. "First time at Luminary?" Sarah nodded. "It's impressive. The gas is really free?" The old man chuckled. "Oh, it comes at a price, just not the one you're used to." Assuming it to be the quip of a lonely old man, Sarah smiled, paid for her souvenir, and left. Back on the road, the couple reveled in their luck. But as miles went by, they noticed their fuel gauge dropping at an alarming rate. In less than an hour, the needle was back on empty. They had no choice but to return to Luminary. Frustrated but desperate, they refueled and decided to spend the night in their car, planning to head to the nearest town in the morning. As night blanketed the station, they began to hear faint whispers. The winds carried fragmented sentences. Give, take, bound. Suddenly the car's lights flickered and the radio powered on. An old-timey tune played, interrupted by a static-laden voice. "The Luminary thanks you for your patronage, but remember, every gift has its price." Panicking, Alex tried to start the car, but the engine sputtered and died. The temperature inside dropped drastically. Outside, the ground trembled, and from beneath the pumps, a viscous fluid oozed, enveloping the car. Sarah remembered the old man's words and in desperation threw out the snow globe. It shattered on the ground, releasing a blinding light. The tremors stopped, the fluid receded, and the whispers silenced. When morning broke, the couple found themselves alone, their car working perfectly. They quickly left, but Sarah was consumed by the mystery. Research led her to ancient legends of soul-eating entities trapped underground. The Luminary gas station was built atop such an entity. The gas was an elixir that temporarily pacified it, but fed off the souls of those who consumed it. The fluid wasn't petrol, it was a trap, binding the souls of the drivers, forcing them to return again and again, each time draining a bit of their essence, until nothing remained. Sarah and Alex started a campaign warning travelers of the perils of Luminary. But as with most legends, their warnings became stories, stories became myths, and myths became challenges for a new generation of adventurers. The neon glow of the open sign at Jasper's Gas and Go was the only light for miles, a dim beacon against the oppressive dark of the Arizona desert night. Eileen, on her way to a new start in California, pulled in, the weight of exhaustion urging her to grab some caffeine and chips for the remaining hours of her journey. As she got out of her car, a gust of wind picked up, causing the sign above to flicker ominously. The entrance bell tinkled as she entered, the atmosphere inside heavy with age and the smell of stale tobacco. Behind the counter stood an old man, his eyes framed by deep-set wrinkles that hinted at years spent under the punishing desert sun. He looked her up and down before letting out a low, almost mournful sigh. "You shouldn't be here at this hour," he whispered. Taken aback, Eileen forced a smile. "Just needed some snacks. I've got a long drive ahead." He leaned forward, the urgency clear in his hushed tone. "There's a reason this place ain't busy at night, miss. Legend speaks of a creature born from the desert's wrath that comes here seeking offerings after midnight. We locals never stop here after dark." Eileen chuckled. "I think I'll risk it for a soda and some chips." Ignoring the attendant's warning, she wandered the narrow aisles, selecting a soda, some jerky, and a bag of chips labeled "Midnight Special" with a peculiar symbol on it, one she hadn't seen before. Curious, she added it to her pile. As she approached the counter, the lights overhead dimmed momentarily, casting the shop into near darkness. The old man looked uneasy. "You shouldn't have taken those chips," he whispered, pointing to the Midnight Special. "What's the big deal?" she replied, amusement evident in her voice. "They're an offering to keep the creature at bay." Chalking it up to a desert man's superstition, she paid, left, and sat in her car, deciding to indulge in her snacks before hitting the road again. The first chip was like no other she had tasted, salty with a strange aftertaste, almost metallic. Suddenly the winds outside intensified, swirling dust and debris. The entire gas station seemed to tremble, and in the dim light of the shop, Eileen could see shadows moving in unnatural patterns, elongated and twisted, merging and breaking apart. Panicking, she tried to start her car, but it remained dead. The shadows grew darker, converging towards her vehicle. In her rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of something, a figure more shadow than substance, with eyes that glowed a deep crimson. Frozen in terror, she remembered the bag of chips. With trembling hands, she threw it outside. The shadows hesitated, then pounced on the discarded bag, the entity among them consuming the offering. As it feasted, the old man emerged from the shop, holding a lantern that cast a deep blue glow. Chanting words Eileen couldn't understand, he walked around her car, the entity keeping its distance, its attention still fixed on the chips. Once he completed his circle, the shadows dissipated, and the entity, now sated, retreated into the desert. The old man approached her window. "You were lucky. Many before you weren't." Struggling to find her voice, she whispered, "What was that?" "A creature of old, bound to this place by ancient magic," he said. "The Midnight Special chips are made from a rare cactus that grows only here. Its essence acts as an offering, placating the creature." Eileen, still in shock, managed to restart her car. Before driving off, she locked eyes with the old man. "Why don't you close the shop at night?" He smiled sadly. "Someone needs to be here to warn folks like you, and if no offerings are made, the creature grows bolder, venturing into the nearby towns." As she drove away, the weight of her encounter sank in. She had laughed off a local legend, and it had almost cost her everything. The desert night around her was no longer just a backdrop to her journey, but a realm where ancient entities still roamed, and where offerings were the price of passage. Jake and Clara's car sputtered its last breath, rolling to a halt on the deserted highway. They were miles from the nearest town, and with nightfall approaching, the barren landscape took on a desolate, menacing aura. To their left, an ancient gas station, long abandoned, stood defiantly against the weight of time, its crumbling sign reading, "Greer's Last Stop." Considering their situation, Jake mused aloud, "Guess it's our last stop, too." The couple approached the station, hoping to find some form of communication. The wood creaked under their weight, its aged texture whispering tales of bygone days. The only thing that seemed out of place was a remarkably well-preserved radio, a relic from the 1940s, placed on the counter. Looking to distract himself from their predicament, Jake started fiddling with the radio, turning the dial. A cacophony of static filled the air before it suddenly gave way to a soft voice, which resonated through the room, its tone full of melancholy. "If anyone can hear me, it's Eleanor. I'm lost. The gas station. I can't get out." Chills ran down Clara's spine. She held Jake's hand tightly. "Turn it off," she whispered, but Jake, mesmerized, continued to tune the frequencies. Another voice broke through, this one older, filled with regret. "James Montgomery. Went to Greer's in 52. Never found my way back. The roads, they change." The air grew colder. The room felt heavy with presence. They were not alone. Desperation filled every crackling voice that came through that ancient device. It wasn't just a radio. It was a portal to the lost souls, an auditory limbo of those who had vanished near Greer's. Panicking, Clara tried to pull Jake away, but he was transfixed. His fingers danced across the dial, bringing in more voices, each filled with sorrow and despair. "Lucinda here. I remember the sun setting. Then nothing. Marco. I stopped for water. Everything's different now." The atmosphere thickened, the weight of the trapped spirits pressing down upon them, a cacophony of decades' worth of the lost and forgotten. Suddenly a voice, clearer than the rest, echoed through. "Jake? Clara? Can you hear us? It's Mum and Dad. We've been looking for you. We stopped here in 78. The roads, they aren't what they seem. Beware the roads." The realization hit Jake with force. Those were his parents, who had disappeared on a road trip when he was just a toddler, their whereabouts always remaining a mystery. The radio wasn't just tuning into the past, it was unraveling layers of time and space. The door behind them creaked. Turning, they saw a figure, a man, faded and transparent, standing at the entrance. His eyes were hollow, yet familiar. "Greer," he whispered. "I built this place, the radio. It's a curse, a magnet for souls. I thought it would bring prosperity, but it trapped them, trapped us, and the roads outside, they shift, they deceive." The couple, realizing the imminent danger they were in, bolted towards their car, but as they exited, they found the landscape changed. The once open highway was now a labyrinth of twisting paths and impossible junctions. Holding hands, they chose a road, running as fast as they could. Behind them, the sounds of the radio grew louder, the voices merging into a haunting chorus, led by Greer's remorseful lament. Hours felt like days. The sun neither rose nor set. The road ahead always seemed to loop them back to the cursed station. Hope was dwindling. In an act of desperation, Clara remembered a silver cross necklace she wore, a family heirloom said to protect against dark spirits. Taking it off, she pressed it into the ground and recited a prayer her grandmother had taught her. A gust of wind blew past them, clearing the deceptive roads. The true highway lay ahead, leading them away from the haunting grip of Greer's last stop. Back in the safety of their home days later, they recounted their ordeal, thankful for their escape but forever scarred by the voices of the forsaken. The radio had given them a glimpse into an interwoven tapestry of lost souls, ensnared by a misguided attempt at prosperity. To this day, truckers and travelers whisper tales of the mysterious gas station where time blurs and roads lead astray, and about the radio that holds the voices of the vanished. But Jake and Clara know the truth. The tragic symphony of Greer's last stop is a tune they'll never forget. As the clock ticks towards dawn, this is Midnight Callers signing off. As we always say, when darkness falls, the stories rise. Sleep tight, if you dare.